All right. Good evening and welcome to the live stream. Haven't done one of these before, so bear with me in case there are any technical glitches as I'm still kind of figuring this out on the fly. Feel free to leave your comments in the little box there on the right. I would love to hear from you. So how is everyone out there? Hello? All right. So basically, I wanted to have a Q&A in case anyone had questions about the series, the states you think you know, or just travel questions or conversation in general. Doesn't have to be about the show. I love to travel, so I'm always happy to give tips if you're planning a trip somewhere, whether it just be generalized travel tips or something location specific, like what do you recommend doing in San Antonio or West Virginia, or whatever the case might be. I've also received comments and private messages and emails. So if we don't have many on the live stream because we're still kind of a small growing channel, we can always jump back to those questions, and I might take some questions from Facebook as well. So otherwise, feel free to ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer. All right. So we did get one question here. Actually got it more than once. Will there be a season 2? At this point, there are no immediate plans for a season 2. There were plans for a season 2 initially, and I had already done research and compiled another 10-episode season that consisted of a mix of Eastern and Midwestern states. North Carolina was actually going to be in season 2, which is where I live, as was Ohio. There are actually a lot of really fun places in Ohio. I think that would have been a good episode. I'm trying to think of what other states. Michigan, New Jersey, Wisconsin, several others I probably can't think of off the top of my head. But basically, we were hoping for a distribution deal, and I had made a connection that I thought was going to come through for us, but it just didn't work out. So instead, I'm self-distributing through YouTube, which changed the dynamics somewhat. So I'm definitely not ruling out a season 2 if the show were to get picked up and funded by a network, somebody other than myself. So, and part of that is that my business is just in a very different place right now. Back in 2019, when I actually filmed everything, business was strong, revenues were flowing, and I had a couple of other employees helping with the SEO work we do for our clients. That meant that if I were to leave the office one week that month, we still had a couple people in the office there to tackle the work. The pandemic really set us back because most of my clients were small businesses that relied on brick and mortar locations. So even though what I do can be done remotely, the same can't be said for a lot of our clients. And so it hit some of them really hard, and advertising budgets got cut as a result. So I'm seeing a difference now in both revenue and staffing when compared to 2019. And unfortunately, I couldn't keep the extra help on because the workload didn't justify it anymore. So time is an issue for me now, as well as budget. But, that could always change down the road. So not ruling anything out. Right. Anybody else? Any other questions? Here's one I've got. What do you look for in a hotel? Now, for filming, I usually just did a Google search, something like weird hotels in Arizona, as opposed to just hotels in Arizona. And I find just adding the word weird in front of your Google searches will populate an entirely different list of results. And you find some really unique and fun places that way. Now, normally when I travel, I'm not staying in places like that because those types of places don't exist in every town. The truth is that, I might be on the road for a week, and one of those nights, I find a really unique place to stay. The other nights, I'm actually staying in your more run-of-the-mill hotels and motels. And for that, I think you have to figure out what's important to you. Maybe it's location. If you're hitting up a high-traffic area with inadequate parking, finding a place where you can walk to the action and limit the number of times you have to drive might be advantageous. For me, the number one thing I look for in a hotel is a good night's sleep. I just don't function otherwise. So if I'm picking a hotel, I try to find one that I know has good insulation. Holiday Inn is decent. Uh, Hampton Inn is decent. Some of the other mainstream hotels that I won't mention here are not. And there are some hotels where every footstep in the room above you sounds like thunder. And I've learned over the years which hotels to avoid for that reason. Now, Embassy Suites is great. They're a little pricier and tend to only be found in metro areas, but I love Embassy. It's well insulated. The rooms are spacious, and they have happy hour from I think 5 to 7, and you get free drinks in the lobby. So whenever I'm able to take advantage of free scotch, I try to do exactly that. Now, sometimes I have to stay in motels for one reason or another. Perhaps I need to be a little bit more budget conscious for that trip. And in some remote areas and smaller towns, the only options might be privately owned motels. And I've learned to go to Google Street View and try to find a one-story motel if I can. I actually learned that lesson in British Columbia. We stayed in this little motel in a small town called Zawasan. And actually, that motel ended up being in a show we were watching called The Good Doctor. We had literally just stayed there, and a couple months later, we were watching a show, and there was an episode where the main character, played by Freddie Highmore, goes on a getaway with this neighbor that he's getting friendly with. And it ended up being that motel. So we're like, we know where that is, which is always a funny thing whenever that happens. It's happened a few times now where I'm watching a movie or TV show and see a spot I've stayed at. So anyway, sorry to chase a rabbit trail there, but the ceiling at this motel was paper thin, and they were stomping around all night long, like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. It never ended, so I ended up pulling this all-nighter. Next day, when I'm sitting in the car waiting, the door to that room opens up, the room that was above us, and they just started piling out. I mean, it was like a clown car, There must have been 15 people in there. I don't know how they all fit. I'm assuming most of them had spots on the floor, so stomping around was probably just a continual cycle of people going to the bathroom. But that was the last time I stayed in a motel with a room above me. Now I try to go to Google Street View and look for one story. Jason, Frosty3, how are you, sir? Yes, is there a big difference with in-room coffee quality with the various chains? That's actually a really good question. Hotel coffee in general is never that great, but it serves its purpose. I haven't really noticed. The only time I really notice a difference in hotels, if it's a nicer hotel that has paid breakfast. So usually the coffee's a little bit better, I guess, if you pay for it. With the ones that offer a free continental breakfast, I don't tend to see as often much of a difference in that regard. Anything else here? So just travel tips. Keep in mind, if you're traveling somewhere, the first thing that shows up when you search for things to do in blank is going to have a lot of people there. And I always think it's a good idea to balance some of the more popular spots in the must-sees with some of the less popular spots that may not get as much attention. And honestly, that's how you find hidden gems. I've come across so many amazing places just because I was willing to go to areas I might not have heard of that showed up lower in the search results. So yeah, less popular doesn't always mean less of an experience. Another thing I always recommend is to really think about the time of year you're going to go, assuming you have flexibility in that regard. For example, if you have mostly outdoor activities planned with no backups and you plan your trip in the middle of rainy season, you might be setting yourself up for disappointments. Not that weather can't still, put a kink in your plans at any time of year, but you can at least mitigate those risks by planning your trips around those seasonal weather trends. The same thing applies for closures. Let's say you're going to Glacier National Park and you plan your trip a little too early in the season. You might be disappointed to get there and find out that going to the Sun Road is still closed. Seasonal road closures are quite common in a lot of the national parks, so access is a concern if you don't show up at the right time. Another thing that I really recommend doing if you're unsure of something is to go to TripAdvisor and check out their forums. You can find forums for specific locations. ask a question in that forum, and you'll get locals on there who do an amazing job of answering those questions for you. It's a great resource, and you get a lot of good travel tips that way. Let's say you want to find the best hidden beach in the area, or do a hike nearby. So you Google hikes in the area and you come up with 185 results. You might feel a little overwhelmed. By the way, the All Trails app is really good for that. But anyway, you can find a forum for that area and ask the community, hey, we're looking for a hike in the area. Where do you recommend going? Now, you want to be more specific than that. You know, if you're just looking for an easy in and out hike, and you don't specify that, you'll get folks recommending 15-mile hikes with 2,000-foot elevation gains. So try to be as specific as possible with what you're looking for. And the TripAdvisor forums can be a very helpful resource. Okay, so Trailforks, okay, Frosty 3 actually mentions Trailforks is a good app too. I'm not familiar with that one. I'll have to check that out. I've used All Trails, but I have not used Trailforks, so I'll definitely look into that one. Jason here on the line is actually an avid hiker, so he could probably be a resource for that. Any other tips? Let me think. Price Shop. I mean, I guess that one's probably pretty obvious. You know, I used to book through Expedia, and lately I've used a travel agent, Paul Graham with Wishlist Travel. And if I remember later, I can put his link in the description. I'll try to remember to add that. But sometimes travel agents can find deals for you might not be able to find on your own. Also, expect the unexpected, because if you travel enough, it's going to happen. I was hoping to be in Barrow, Alaska during the Whaling Festival, which is a big festival they put on around the time of the summer solstice. But there were two problems. The dates of that festival are decided like 3 weeks before it's going to take place. So, you know, I called the city government, dug around, and they just don't set dates until closer to the event. The other problem is that you have to book your hotel 6 months in advance just to get a room. So you have to decide, you know, when you're going to be there long before you know when the festival is going to take place. And that makes it really hard to plan your trip. So I did book 6 months in advance, and I still couldn't find a rental car. There was one small agency in town and they were booked up. So I got put on a waiting list. And a few months later, I got the call that a car had become available. I think the hotel said they had a couple rooms left when I booked 6 months out. If I literally waited 2 weeks, they wouldn't have been there. So I booked for the same week that it took place the previous year, the Whaling Festival, which was the week of the solstice. And they ended up scheduling it 1 week later that year. So the festival was going to take place a week after I left. But, you know, by the time I found that out, flights were booked, hotel was booked, car was booked, and there was no flexibility. In fact, we were a little nervous when our return flight couldn't land. They had one flight that came in a day. And if the flight can't land due to fog, that's it. You're stuck in Barrow. And we were stuck for 2 more days because there wasn't an available flight coming the next day either. So the issue with that is the hotel didn't have rooms and there was no place to stay in town. So they were going to let us stay in the airport. Of course, there's nowhere to lay down in that airport. There's just a row of hard plastic chairs and a concrete floor with like dirt 2 inches thick. They don't even have water in the airport, not bottled water, not a fountain, nothing. I mean, this airport is small. We literally had to walk through someone's personal office when we got off the plane just to get our luggage. They actually have to clear the runway for polar bears on occasion. Seriously. It's not like you can just drive somewhere because there are no roads leaving Barrow. The nearest town is Prudhoe Bay, and that's like a 350-mile trek across the Arctic tundra on foot. So, you know, obviously you're not going there. So that was a little stressful. Fortunately, about 10 o'clock at night, which of course looks like noon because the sun doesn't set, we get a call back from the hotel, and they had a room open up. I'm guessing probably a cancellation from the flight that didn't land. So as much as I enjoy visiting remote areas, it can be a stressful experience sometimes, but it all worked out in the end. So I think that's it. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. I did get a comment here. One of the videos here. You know, bartenders hate when you ask them what you should get. True. Some do get tired of asking or answering that question. If you're referring to the show, I mean, the bars that I hit up were a little more unique to begin with, and they tend to have drinks that you can't find anywhere else. So they're accustomed to fielding that question more often. But I also want to give them the opportunity to tell us on camera about some of their signature drinks. So asking that question is a good way to set that up for them. Now, if it's just me off camera going to a bar, you know, I don't ask that question because I order a scotch 10 times out of 10, but that would make for a boring show. Nobody wants to sit there and watch me drink scotch every episode. I could probably do a whole like YouTube channel dedicated to scotch. Other comments. One of the comments I frequently get, and even just you know, speaking to people, is, "Oh, you forgot about blank." And sometimes those suggestions are great suggestions. Sometimes they're neat places, but may not fit the format of the show. And sometimes they're places I didn't forget about at all. They just want to let me film there, often for legal reasons. So I typically will have a plan A, plan B, plan C, and sometimes it works out perfectly. You know, your plan A gets right back to you and says, yes, we would love to have you come out and film. Arizona kind of worked out that way. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Colorado is actually a great example of that. You know, I try to find a hotel or B&B or some type of lodging in every state, and I didn't have one in Colorado. I had a plan A, B, C, D, and E, and none of them would get back to me with a yes. Fortunately, there were plenty of other opportunities and attractions in that state to take advantage of, so it ended up being a solid episode. We just didn't have a hotel. And as I got deeper into the project, I began to realize, you know, it wasn't enough to have enough cool places to film in a state that would hypothetically fill an episode. You had to have enough backups in that state just in case your plan A didn't work out. Some of the other comments I saw frequently, and this was not surprising, were political comments. And I'm continually amazed at the sheer volume of people who will watch a non-political video that doesn't have anything to do with politics, yet still feel the need to inject their politics into every situation. And it's just a reminder of how hyper-politicized everything has become. You know, I used to read the comments on Yahoo, and I would notice they were all political, regardless of what the article was about. It could be an article about ice cream, you know, it doesn't matter. It's like they have this unhealthy obsession with their own politics that must define every waking moment and be randomly injected into every situation. It's exhausting. You know, I keep seeing this meme going around. Most of you have probably seen it by now. And it says, avoiding the topic of politics has led to an inability to discuss politics civilly, or something like that. I can't remember exactly how it's phrased. But I keep seeing this meme, and I'm thinking to myself, do people really think this is a problem? Do people think we have an issue where the general population doesn't want to discuss politics or are afraid to talk about politics? Because from my vantage point, it seems to have permeated everything. I mean, that pendulum has swung so far the other direction. And I think it's sad. You know, most Americans see things in terms of red state, blue state, and that's a bunch of nonsense as far as I'm concerned, you know. And I've seen that in other videos too. You know, I watched a video on Yosemite once. I remember the comments were all about, you know, how the liberal governor this and how taxes and overregulation destroyed the state that. And I mean, it's a video about Yosemite. Politics wasn't even mentioned. I happen to like California. You know, I don't like it because their taxes are higher because it's a liberal state. I like it because they have 9 national parks. I'm a tourist. You know, what do I care about property taxes in California? Now, if I'm making a video about moving to California, then that's a different story, and those are certainly things to consider. I think Oregon was the worst. Not on YouTube, but on a Facebook page it was shared to. The comments exploded, and they were all, you know, political in some way and very nasty. The other one like that was Idaho, for different reasons. And that was on the YouTube video. But Idahoans hate when you compliment their state publicly. And I knew that going in. You know, they're the opposite of Alaska in that regard. If you compliment Alaska, Alaskans will, you know, pound their chest with pride and agree with you and tell you, you know, how great their state is and tell everyone how much they love their state. Idahoans, on the other hand, get downright nasty and will tell you how horrible it is and how you just need to stay out. They don't accept compliments very well. Well, at least not publicly. Privately, they'll tell you how much they love their state, and they do take a lot of pride in it. They just don't want you broadcasting that to everyone else, and that doesn't bother me. I could see why they would feel that way. They've been the fastest growing state for a while now, and a bunch of newcomers moving in doesn't sit well with some of the locals. And just trying to empathize here, I think there's a natural sense of entitlement that comes from being first. So then newcomers are perceived as an intrusion, and I think that's human nature to some degree. But I think the real issue is that if you choose to settle down in a town of 10,000 people, it's probably because you want to live in a town of 10,000 people. You don't want to live in a town of 30,000 people. So growth changes the dynamics of that small town environment. I mean, look, I lived in Heber City, Utah for a while. And when the Walmart went in, many of the locals didn't want it. It was very contentious because the town was afraid that, having a Walmart would encourage growth. It was actually put to a public vote and passed 51-49, razor thin margin. By the same token, some small YouTuber in North Carolina with a few hundred followers isn't the reason your state's growing. That cat's out of the bag. It's been out for a while. The flip side of that argument is that, I'm an American citizen and I'll live wherever I see fit in my own country, and that's nobody's call but mine. And if you live in Idaho, you have the same opportunities as everybody else. If you want to take a higher paying job in Chicago, you can do that too. That's your right. So it's hard to criticize someone for doing what they feel is best for their family. I reside in North Carolina and I'm very happy here, but my home is the United States. Now, most of the complaints you hear from people, not just in Idaho, but across the country, and I think it's a universal thing. I've been to every state and you hear this all over the place. It tends to revolve around Californians moving in. Now, some of those complaints are legitimate and some of them are not. For example, the whole "they're bringing their politics and trying to change our state" argument simply isn't true. There have been extensive studies conducted on the shifting demographics of the country. And what has been found is that the majority of Californians leaving tend to move to states that align more with their ideology. Now, that's not to say everyone, mind you, but the majority. We're talking about averages here. So conservative Californians, which still makes up a sizable group of people. I mean, you've got 40 million people in that state. They tend to move to states like Texas, Idaho, Montana, and sometimes we'll cite politics as one of the reasons they left. Whereas liberal Californians tend to move to states like Washington, Oregon, and Colorado. In many cases, shifting ideologies in different states has more to do with shifting age demographics than it does actual geography. And I've met, just as many people from some of those blue states that complain about Californians moving into and driving up the property costs. And in some ways, I kind of feel bad for Californians because some of them are fourth generation. Their grandparents and their great grandparents lived there, and then there was a huge boom in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s of people from all these other states moving into California for any number of reasons. Whether it be for the weather, the scenery, job opportunities, or just hoping to get discovered. Whatever the case is. But all these people moving into California from all these other states drove up the cost of living there, and property values took off too. So now a lot of these Californians can't afford to live in their own state anymore, and they're being forced to leave. So now when they try to go into those other states, they're getting yelled at and told they're not welcome. So I just think the world would be a much better place if we all took a second, kind of stepped back and tried to understand what it's like to be in another person's shoes. Empathize, and if you still want to be an asshole, well then, that's certainly your right, and that's on you. All right. Any other questions here? How did I come up with the episodes? Assuming that means how do I plan them? So I usually just start with hotels and lodging, and then move on to restaurants from there. And if there aren't any really unique restaurants in the area, or maybe there are, but they're places I think everyone outside of the state has probably already heard of, then I'll move on to bars. So my goal is to get a hotel in a restaurant in every episode. Doesn't always work out that way, but oftentimes it does. After that, I start looking for unique attractions, towns with interesting history, that sort of thing. And of course, every episode has 5 weird laws and 5, fun town names. So that's kind of a universal format for every episode. I get this one frequently here. Why don't you visit the national parks? And sometimes people ask me specific parks, you should have went here, you should have went to Olympic Park, whatever the case might be. And that's a good question. So the national parks are kind of complicated. It's multifaceted here. First of all, they don't want people filming there. And you have to get a special type of permit, which seems strange to me because it's public land, it's paid for by the people. But many YouTubers have gotten in trouble and even fined excessively for filming their travels and then posting it to YouTube, which seems crazy to me. But last year, that was finally overturned now. There was a court case where a YouTuber took on the park system and actually won. So that has now opened the gates, so to speak, for people to want to film their travels and share it online. So I think that's a great thing. The other reason is I don't want to feature it on the state series because I try to hit up places that I feel most people who don't live there probably don't know about. The travel series is really geared towards tourists, and specifically tourists that might want to find something unique that you don't hear about every day. And I feel like everyone knows about the national park, so I'm probably not telling you anything you weren't already aware of by featuring there. The other aspect is that these weren't really vacations for me. I was working the entire time. There's a lot that goes into filming, and I didn't have a crew. It was just me and my wife on a couple of episodes. I think Colorado and Oregon. We did have another person, Shane, that helped with the filming, and he did a great job. But most of the time, my wife is running around grabbing signatures on the image releases and location releases while I'm lugging the equipment around and literally setting up my own shot, running around all day, trying to cram everything in, get all the necessary shots, then jump in the car, drive a few hours to the other side of the state, go to bed late, get up early, and then do it all over again. So when I'm in that state, I usually try to schedule an off day where I'm not worried about filming. I can just relax, take in my surroundings. And those off days were usually national parks. In fact, I just went to Acadia National Park last month, and that's all I did. It was nice to be an actual tourist for once and not worry about filming anything. I think that was the first, vacation I've had in a few years. And if you've never been to Acadia, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful, beautiful park. It's up in Maine. I did take a lot of pictures, with my cell phone. So I don't know. I may make a video at some point. It just, won't be professionally produced or anything. Future videos. So I am planning to eventually put out some more videos here on this channel. They just won't be a part of the States You Think You Know series and won't involve as much time. So once again, probably not as professionally produced as some of the other videos on my channel. And I'm still debating on which direction to go with that. Would love to hear your input. Thinking about doing some ranking videos, top 10 mountain towns, top 10 hikes, ranking every state, that sort of thing. And I might still make videos about specific places or perhaps give some travel tips. I don't know. What do you guys want to see? Leave it in the comments. We'd love to hear your feedback. Where do you think the channel should go from here? All right. So what's your favorite place? I think that's the one I get asked most often. I get asked that one a lot. What's your favorite place? If you're talking about the state series, man, that's kind of tough. I think I have a different answer every time. Oatman was a really cool town. The Black Swan Inn might have been the best hotel I've ever stayed at, and the owners are wonderful people. So that one really stands out to me. And Settlers Crossing was great. I really want to go back to that place. Now, the segment, Settlers Crossing, it probably wasn't one of our better segments in the Texas episode, but having been there in person, I can tell you it's very relaxing. It's a nice getaway spot. Now, outside of the state series, I think Monument Valley is my favorite spot. And I have a video about Monument Valley on my channel. I think it's called My Favorite Places in America. And I've been horseback riding a couple of times there, and that's always a great experience because you really feel like you're in a Western. It's such an iconic landscape. And I find that I tend to prefer remote areas now in general. I used to love the city, but after being stuck in rush hour in every major city in America, I've become the guy that's like, yeah, just send me to Mars. I don't mind. Right? Uh, One of my favorite drives is actually just north of Monument Valley. If you get off the main highway and you jump onto 261, you end up climbing this mountain on this dirt road with a bunch of switchbacks, and you get some amazing views of the canyons from there. But that highway is desolate. I drove for 3 hours and never had a single car in front of me or behind me at any point in time. I went a full hour without even passing by a car coming from the other direction. It's just endless desert. There are no people, no buildings, no telephone wires, aside from the fact that you are still on a road. Really no sign that civilization ever even existed. It's about as closest as you can come to feeling like you're on another planet. Central Nevada is like that. There are a lot of highways in Nevada like that. Actually, I almost ran out of gas heading back from Area 51. It's kind of a fun story. So yeah, I'll tell that. So went to Area 51, did the whole walk up to the gate, I'm a dumb tourist thing, saw the white trucks, saw the camo guys. But as we're driving away, our phone shut off. The dashboard of the car shuts off, the clock, the GoPro shuts off. It literally reset my GoPro back to the factory settings. So I had to reformat everything when I got back to the hotel that night. So yeah, they've got some interesting tech out there. We also stopped at the Little Alien, that's what it's called, for lunch. It's just a little diner in the area. And I was kind of surprised by how remote it was. I mean, that diner is the only thing for 100 miles. And I thought it would be a popular spot because I've seen that diner featured on TV shows as well. Area 51 is sort of a well-known spot. So I expected to see some fellow tourists out there, but we didn't. We arrived at the diner at 12 noon during what would normally be the lunch rush for most diners. And there was one couple inside that were leaving about the time, we were sitting down. And then we were the only ones there. We were there probably from 12 to 12:45. And nobody showed up that entire time. We were the only ones at the diner. So that was kind of surprising. But anyway, back to running out of gas. I get a little sidetracked at times. We had filled up at the last gas station we saw in a town called Alamo before we hit Highway 375, which is what leads up to Area 51. And it's still a good drive from there to get to Area 51. Well, instead of continuing to head north on 375, we decided to turn around because I looked it up earlier and didn't see any gas stations further up that highway. So I was going to backtrack and jump on another highway. I can't even remember now because there was a small town down that highway called Caliente where I could stop for gas. Well, there are two highways that run parallel to each other heading north, and I took the wrong one. Apparently, I turned left just a bit too soon, and I used, normally would use GPS on my phone, but it's not like that's working out there, right? I'm in the middle of nowhere. So I'm heading north down this highway. There's nothing out there, just miles and miles of desert. I got all the way down to a quarter tank of gas. I haven't seen a gas station since I filled up on gas. And I'm getting a little nervous, I don't have cell service. I have a AAA membership, but that's not going to do me any good way out here. So if I run out, that's it. I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, right before the highway ended, there was this town, if you want to call it that. I can't remember the name, starts with an L, but I actually think it was Lund. There weren't any gas stations there. But then as you got to the other side of the highway, there's like this lone gas pump on a concrete slab, no building, middle of the desert. There wasn't a convenience store or anything there. Just one pump on a slab of concrete. And I'm thinking, geez, I hope this works. And it did. They even accept credit cards. So yeah, that's not a good place to make a wrong turn. So all right, any other questions? All right, I guess we ran a good half hour here. Maybe try this again at some point and do some more travel Q&As. Would love to hear your comments. Leave your comments down below. Future videos, the types of things you would like to see on this channel moving forward. I would love to hear your input on some video ideas. Once again, probably not, unless it gets picked up by somebody, not going to move on with the state series, but just make some typical YouTube videos, probably ranking videos, that type of thing. So anyway, thank you guys for joining the call.